I am Father Sebastian and Michael, SVD. I'm from India, Mumbai province. I was professor at the Bombay University, cultural anthropologist. I'm very happy to be here to moderate this session. We have distinguished Dr. Dorottya Nagy. She is a theologian, missiologist, holding the chair of Theology and Migration at the Protestant Theological University, Utrecht, the Netherlands. She is leading the Central and Eastern Association for Mission Studies and presently is editor-in-chief of Mission Studies, Journal of the International Association for Mission Studies, YAMS. She is an ordained Lutheran minister, married, and mother of 2 children. So she will be talking to us in continuation of our main theme on contextualizing Europe, Christian mission through theories of postmodernity. I present to you Dr. Dorottya.
Thank you.
Good.
Good morning, everyone. I tried to detect a clock in this room because I'm coming from Central and Eastern Europe, and my sense of time is rather problematic. So when you think like you are either fed up with my talk or you sense that there is really time to go over and have discussions, please wave or reject or, I don't know, rebel, do something. So once again, good morning. It is such an honor to be here at this university with these distinguished colleagues. And whenever I use the word colleagues, I go back to the etymology of this word, which means reading together. So what we try is to read together some pieces and bites of our word, our situatedness, our tasks, our vocation, our jobs. So it's just such an honor. And thank you, Sebastian, for coordinating and chairing this session. Yes, contextualizing Europe, Christian mission through theories of postmodernity. This is the working title of my talk today, my presentation today. And you see that I have put in quotation marks this Europe, and we will see why did I do so. Well, question is, to what extent can the notion of postmodern help in conceiving theology, missiology for, within, and from Europe, within Christian communities as learning communities? Or put it differently, to what extent can the notion of postmodern become a contextualizing tool for theological, missiological praxis, theological education in relation to Europe? And of course, asking these questions just such in a vague may not make any sense. So I do have to reveal something about my positionality next to being a wife and mother of 2 children or a Lutheran ordained minister. Why do these questions burden me and why do they bother me? Well, it happens that we gather together in a building of a university. And the position in which or from which I am engaging in these matters of contextualization, missiology, theology, it is from a position of university. But by saying that, position of university also implies that I would like to invite each and every one of you, before we embark on this presentation proper, to reflect a little bit from which position are you sitting here and how does that position link to Christian education in whatever sense. So many of you just identifying as missionaries or religious, you cannot avoid the question of theological education directly or indirectly, either because you have to do with priests who were educated, formed theologically in a certain way, or yourself are educated, or you are involved in education, and perhaps not at the level of the university. And you see how we appropriate thinking in levels. At the moment I say at the level of university, I raise up my arms and say level of the universities, but at the level of the communities, of the embodied practices of real life. So you are really into Christian education, theological formation of what we call lived theology for sure. So again, my questions come from the classroom, from being a theological educator, dealing with the big questions. How do we become learning communities with our students, and how is it possible that we change for a better? And what is better, of course, it's a qualitative term. So the postmodern condition, the postmodern paradigm, and so many other layers which Pavel already introduced us in the keynote, we will continue to build up on this a little bit. The already and not yet beyond the postmodern, this, again, this positionality, where do we find ourselves by the time we start discussing the postmodern? We might find ourselves in a whole different time and age. Some argue for this. Well, you will see from my presentation that I do not argue for that. And the relationality, we have already heard from Pavel this keyword, relationality. And I hope that this presentation this morning will build further on what I coin relational theology, missiology. Europe. So, what is Europe? What is Europe? You can, of course, ask also the question, who is Europe? Or where is Europe? Or how is Europe? And you see that identifying Europe as a mission field is just one of the many competing narratives in catching the essence of what Europe might mean for theologizing and missiologizing in the present day. But which theological, ideological narratives construct Europe as a context for mission? In the midst of which ideological narratives do you find yourself in your being a theological educator in a way or another in relation to the construct Europe? But then, of course, the same question applies for the mission. What is mission? So what kind of assumptions do we enter in our conversations when we talk about mission? How is it? Who is that? Who is mission? Where is that? So, and the same question you could apply also for the highlighted notion of context. What is context? Where is context? Who is the context? How is the context? So you see, playing around by very simple, basic questions already trigger us to think a step further, to go to build up also on the previous keynote lecture. Now, in theological education, in theological research, in research proper, in discourses, we always search for keywords. And sorry for the German subtitle of this picture, but searching for keywords is always has the danger of becoming or being superficial. So this is also a disclaimer. At the moment we start using the notion of postmodernity, make sure that you really want to go deeper and trouble the waters and do not avoid the Trüben. So try to get into the messiness and in the dirt of what is there when we stir up our worldviews with, for example, such a concept as postmodernity. Be conscious about the words, the concepts which describe the condition of the context in which theologians, missiologists, priests, religious, ministers, missionaries ask the question about mission. So postmodernity, in that sense, is also such a tool, such a keyword of trying to get deeper into our conversations, finding meaning and also identifying tasks, if you wish, praxis for today. So the posture here I invite us to get is, again, this learning. So thinking about the postmodern from our roles as leaders of learning communities, remaining learners and teachers, always both. So we are not only learners, but we are teachers, so that's leadership models. And we are not only teachers, but we are learners. Again, postmodernity. Where to start? And you believe me or not, I forced myself to go back to somehow to a very old text, which was written 46 years ago and published in French. And this is the text of Jean-François Lyotard, The Postmodern Condition. I would like to check whether there is any familiarity with this text, with short text. Who of you have read it or had to read it in this, or were pushed to read it? Yeah, some of them. So you see, when we are talking, in academics, when we are talking with this keyword of postmodernity, very often and quite quickly, this text, this classical text written by François Lyotard in 1979 again, comes to fore and it's referred to. Now, what I see happening in the literature on postmodernity, it happens very often also, for example, with the term Missio Dei, some people write a sort of or a genealogy of the term postmodern, and then others quote it and they stick to it. So by the end of the day, it's like this. It is like this game when we start. Okay, let's end the game there. So what did you hear? Postmodernity. And guess what I told him? I told him the postman is dirty. So this is exactly what is happening. This is exactly what is happening in the appropriation of genealogies, of hearing in or reading in something which we want to or expect to. And this happened also with this guy, the Lyotard, so the postman is dirty. Well, and postmodernity, there is quite a long way between the two, and it was only just a few days, and I don't know where it went wrong. So it might be that in the very beginning it already went wrong, or maybe in the second row it went wrong, I don't know. But there is clear that something is, when we transmit readings and do not go back and clearly ask, okay, what was exactly what you said, then we might end up canonizing keywords and canonizing meanings ascribed to those keywords. Well, with the François Lyotard, I've just copied here the English translation of the table of contents of his book. And in my reading, actually rereading of this small booklet written in 1979, I think that I would like to put some different accents to reading this book than the accents which are usually quoted. And one of the big accents which is usually quoted is that François Lyotard pushes or dismisses the existence of big narratives, which is called grand narratives. In my rereading of this text, I think that what he is saying in this little booklet is that watch out, there will be a multiplication of grand narratives worldwide. So it is not that the grand narratives will disappear, but there will be a multiplicity of ideologies, a competition of grand narratives on a scale unseen before. Well, this is quite a different reading, and I might be mistaken. And as the cardinal yesterday standing here was saying, I am here and I am here to be corrected. But it is a possible reading for sure. Now, he wrote this text and dedicated this text for a university. And the very first sentence, I can't quote it literally, it is that he writes this text in a time when the university as an institution is in a crisis, and he describes this crisis, the postmodern condition. So for Lyotard, the whole discussion of postmodernity is rooted and linked to knowledge, the question of knowledge. Where do we know what we know? How do we know what we know? Why do we know what we know? And what we do with that what we know. So these are profound existential questions in Lyotard's text. And you see, quite in a missiological fashion, the keywords, further keywords, which are also quite important for us as theologians, missiologians, appear. You see next to the knowledge, you see the legitimation, so the authority, so to say, the language gains, that's a reference back to Wittgenstein, I will say a few words about that, pragmatics, and of course the narratives. So on this table of contents, you already can identify the keywords based on which we are moving this whole idea of postmodernity discourses. Just in the first line, on the first point, you see the computerized societies. And this aspect of Lyotard's argument is very often forgotten. And today we touched upon a little bit in the keynote lecture, but this crisis of knowledge, Lyotard links to the computerization of the societies. Put it differently, the way that we are thinking through machines and taking decisions through machines affect our whole lives as humans. Let me just show you a very interesting quote. So the question about what is true, that becomes a backward question, so to say, and the question which is relevant is more, what is the use of it? And this is a tricky thing, because you relate truth to usefulness. And that's a manipulative way of relation. And if there were people like Grace Davy already in the early 90s describing also the corruption of the academic research in terms of fashions of language, fundings, and so on. So you see, those examples are touching upon the problem I am talking about. It is not so much about the true, but so what? What use is it? And to go one step further, so it's about owning knowledge, and owning knowledge implies competition for power in language games. And by language games, Lyotard, with reference to Wittgenstein, talks about networks who develop their own terminology. So if I meet Christian And he says that when we start discussing mission, we develop our own terminology. And sooner or later, if we do not understand each other, we have the opportunity to ask each other, did you hear postmodernity? Or did I say postmodernity? Did you hear that? So there is a check. We somehow develop a language. But the language we develop here and start playing it, acting it out, may have no relevance to the group of Mika over there, or even further, it may cause a lot of confusion and misinformation to that group. So basically, through language games and through these bubbles, we create hubs and little circles within societies which do not even clash, or if they clash very much, because they simply do not understand each other. So they don't have a common language based on which they can interact with each other. So, but going further, one step further, control over information and knowledge. This quote was written in 1979. Knowledge in the form of an informational commodity, indispensable to productive power, is already and will continue to be a major, perhaps the major stake in the worldwide competition of power. Are we not there in 2024? It is conceivable that the nation-state will one day fight for control over information, just as they battled in the past for control over territory, and afterwards for control of access to and exploitation of raw materials and cheap labor. A new field is opened for industrial and commercial strategies on the one hand, and political and military strategies on the other. So please take this aspect with you, the owning of information / knowledge, where, by whom, when, and for how, for what purpose. I have to speed up, even if my Central Eastern European non-time feeling says that I have to hurry up here. So the perfect information at any time, at any given moment, Lyotard ends this little booklet on the condition, postmodern condition, with this sentence. And then, of course, there is a new chapter on what is postmodernity. As he says, language games would then be games of perfect information at any given moment. And in an idealistic way, he invites policymakers and power owners, so governments, to open up data bank so that each and every person on the world could somehow everywhere have access to knowledge. So this is what we try to call open access. But the problem there is in Lyotard's naivety that he did not really count with the algorithms. And the challenges of the algorithms cause our bubbles even, or deepen our bubbles even further. So you see, this is all about mission, about transmitting knowledge, acquiring knowledge, and creating the contexts for our mission, or understandings about the context in which we perform mission. Now, I've tried to go one step further, and I just looked to some theological, missiological discourses which were developed around this notion of postmodernity. And the classical one within the Protestant circles, at least the canon of David Bosch, Transforming Mission. Surprisingly, David Bosch, in his big work, again, the Bible for the missiologists in the Protestant circles, for some time at least, he has a very short section on postmodernity. You see the page numbers quite at the end of his book, some 10 pages. But what is important there, he says, expansion of rationality, language cannot be absolutely accurate. So David Bosch from South Africa, going through all his apartheid struggles and all these issues, he realizes that language games are important for missiology. It is important to go beyond dichotomies, subject-object scheme. He rediscovers the teleological dimensions contingency, non-linear. So all these issues are part of postmodernity, Lyotard's postmodernity, which is never a particular time age or time frame, but it is a movement. It is always a reaction, as you wish, with this violent word, reaction, perhaps also a proaction in relation to modernity. The challenge of progress thinking, trusted optimism, and importantly, toward interdependence instead of the generation, instead of a I generation, me generation, a we generation. So these are quite crucial for developing mission theology. There are some other examples within the global network of missiologists heading toward Edinburgh 2010, there was a whole process of accommodating discourses on postmodernity. And Mika Vehekanga is sitting here. He was, I think you were one of the leaders of this postmodern group also in the Nordic countries, in Nîmes. So in 2007, they started brainstorming and tried to develop really this thinking about postmodernity within missiological circles. And by the end, in 2010, indeed, this was a huge section in the mission conference commemorating Edinburgh, in one of the mission conferences commemorating Edinburgh 2010. Now, I was not really satisfied with all these missiological discourses, canonizing way of Lyotard, what's that, whispering in each other's ears and then seeing to what extent do we get. So I tried to dig a little bit further, and the further I went, the more complex it became. One of the complexities I would like to show here is there is this Arnold J. Toynbee, a historian, which is perhaps also one of the historians who started to decentralize the so-called Eurocentric perspective. So how did he do that? He says, okay, if we write history, you see, then you have this model of ancient, medieval, modern, but this is not correct. There should be some more Hellenistic Western, perhaps, and when we step into the age, what he calls historian, postmodern, there one should pay attention, because from there on, the Eurocentric perspective might become very clear. So that will be a turning towards us, and he warns that one should go and revisit history from other perspective, from the perspective of the Chinese empire, from the perspective of the Syrian empires, and so on and so forth. Particularly interesting for us today here is this little date, 1875. What was 1875? 1875, the foundation, of course, the SVD was there. So I did not have a chance to check with Toynbee whether this periodization is based because of the SVD's emergence in 1875. But for sure, there was something happening there. And I would dare to go so far at the end of my slides to, maybe I just planted the bug in your ear already, again, playing with your ear. To what extent is SVD a postmodern society? Just sure about that. But these postmodernities at large, we have heard from our colleague during the key word in the question session, they are like modernities, they are at large. So this is something which we have to take into consideration. And postmodernities at large, beyond Europe, imply all these issues. Now, I still had an earlier text on these postmodernity things, this time by a minister who wrote a lot on the matter of postmodernity, Bernard Eddings-Bell. In 1939, he talks about the postmodernist man. And of course, sorry for the gender terminology he uses, but one of the assessments of his postmodern condition is that things are not improving, the human is not a hero, and questioning the power. So again, in the 30s, when very similar dynamics to ours were at stake, there were these people reading societies, powers, and coining terms, keywords, through which to interpret the society. So shortly, by the time in 2010, when the theological missiological thinking thematicized the term postmodernity, or the issue of postmodernity, this term was at least considered, or the condition was considered to be at least 100 years old, maybe even older. Now, I have just prepared some examples. You will get the PowerPoint for sure, but let me just jump to the end of my presentation. These are already things I have more or less shared with you. The postmodern theologizing, missiologizing through the postmodern, through the keynote of the postmodern, pushes us towards questioning dichotomies. And such dichotomies are, for example, gospel and culture, or East and West, to name a few. It also pushes us towards questioning the fashion of mission in target groups. Target grouping in mission operates based on homogenization principles. What we learn from postmodernity, we don't really know who the other is unless we touch him, we speak to him, we listen to her, and we feel or cry or do something with her. So these aspects of the postmodern discourse, explained through this logic, pushes us from this homogenizing principle of the target group ministry. There is much to say there. So this relationality as a givenness. Society is about being in relations and not about having relations. But please, watch out for idealization. It's not everything sunny and pink. There is a lot of shade to the givenness of the relationality. Take the givenness of the relationships of the particular geographical place seriously, but the I is never in isolation. So again, almost repetition of the keynote. And dwell on the creative tension of the local relationships and the worldwide connectivity. The importance of the small and the little, but the small and the little does not mean that grand narratives are dismissed again. So in small and little, competing for power and competing for the one and only explanation of the word, to put it in a dichotomy from left and from right, is evenly present. So populism is not only a right-wing political phenomenon, it can be also a left-wing political phenomenon. Yes, so this was the look at the terminology and the symbol, sorry for this misspell, on this page, in terms of from the perspective of the postmodern discourses. What happens from everywhere, so this worldwide connectivity, space, location, for everyone. The individual, the mass, the tension of these two are totally introduced. The question of agency. Witnessing. Think of the language. Why is this word here? Witnessing to the light. So there is no Jesus, God, Mary, Holy Spirit. There is the terminology. What does that imply? What does that express is there? So once again, the question, postmodern mission? And just the last slides, I give it to you. In postmodern discourses, next to this givenness of digitalized, computerized societies, the principle that the word became flesh and words become flesh matter. All of us sitting here, standing here, are embodiments of words which shape policy making, action, religion, faith, and this is how we sit here. And this is what we will transfer further. Oceanian colleagues go further than the ecumenical theologies, and I like this term coined in Oceania, and I give it without reference because that was really a whole group working on this, not only Mike Bird, oeconomical theologies, which try to see the interconnectivity of the ecumenical, ecological, and economical. And these are also aspects in this postmodern society which invite us to revisit our connectings, our communicatings, our confessings, our covenanting, to go again back to a South African terminology, collaborating, commemorating, and then to rediscuss this whole question of who we are and the relation to unity. And that might lead us to a set of dangerous memories, to evoke Johann Baptist Metz's term, dangerous deeds, dangerous hope, dangerous courage, dangerous faith, dangerous words, dangerous relationships. And here somewhere I see the task of contextualizing Europe, or for that case, contextualizing whatever unit for the sake of practicing mission. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Now, the house is open. If you have any clarification, comments, please. Mike there. There.
Good morning. Mike, good morning. I am Sister Marie Chris from the Franciscan Missionaries of Mary. Thank you for your presentation and the putting importance on the word, the language that we must really put more importance to. No? But now my question is relating to artificial intelligence. When words are altered or created, I think it is a new factor that we must consider into postmodernity.
Any other? We'll take together 2-3 questions or comments, please.
Christian Tauchner from the Divine Word Missionaries. I would be wondering, you hinted a little bit on it, the importance of translation. And I would remember Lamin Sanneh with great respect about the possibility of translation, that Christian faith can be translated. And maybe you want to expand a little bit on that. Anyhow, I think it's important.
One more. Any? Okay. Oh, yeah, there.
Thank you, Dorottya. I'm Wojciech. We know each other, but a member of this postmodern society. And we had a most wonderful conversation on the way from the airport. Now I would like your personal comment, because after all, this is a conference on mission, and I assume we're talking about Christian mission here. And I'm struggling very much these days, and this conference is hopefully going to help me to come to understand better. We're talking about words, polyvalence of words, the use of words, the pragmatics of words. Now, here I'm wrestling with the concept of the revealed word, and let me talk about the Bible, okay, the scripture, Christian scripture. Would you, or how would you assess the role of the scripture, or the postmodern realities do not accord the Bible any kind of special role. It's just words. Now, but a faith perspective, and you as a Lutheran minister perhaps could speak to that very well, how would you envision a role of the revealed word scripture in this postmodern reality of mission?
Okay, please. Respond.
Yes. Thank you. These all three questions move a little bit about or around language, community, individuality, and of course the computerized society with Lyotard's word. To start with the AI and changing of altering words. And that right away connects also to your question, Christian, about translation. The problem or the challenge perhaps of this digitalized word is that knowledge needs to be translated or will be translated through machines. So there is already the act of translation, and what that means for conversations or embodied knowledge, it's left with those who read. So put it differently, if it's only my smartphone through which I get orientation in this word, I will be lost, or perhaps saved on an island. Which brings me to your question, Wojciech, is that there are I think in each and everyone's theologizing some principles which you simply do not negotiate on. These are assumptions or principles. One of such assumptions for me is the relationality. So if we conceive of God in relationality, that time and again pushes me out of the comfort or confrontation or desperation of the I. So put it differently, when I am referring to, oh no, it's already gone, to communicating, that is, so taking seriously that the I is always relational for the better or the worse. And in terms of Christian communities, you time and again have to form these hermeneutical, these conversing communities, which also become confessional communities. We confess what we know and we retain from what we do not know. But this knowing is always in fragments. So this knowing is the revealed knowledge, is a knowledge revealed in relationality. And what is relationality to each other and to God? That is something which we have to discover together. So in that revealed word, you said the revealed word is a loaded concept with the history of 2,000 years of Christianity. And the postmodernity discourse, in the way I introduced it, will ask time and again, how do we know that? How do we know that this is revealed? And I don't think that I can go further than that, but how do I know that? For myself, I try to find out, sorry for referring back to Pavel's joke in the beginning, if possible, relate to people who have this question. Not the same question, because it's not the same, but to relate. And in the communities we are living in the church communities, it is again the principle of inviting voices which context my theology of revealed word. That's a pastoral and leadership task. It may not happen by itself, especially not with the help of algorithms. I don't know whether it answers.
Thank you. Any other? Second round. Yeah, please.
I'm George, a Jesuit. I want to ask a very practical question. See, in terms of ecumenism now, in the whole postmodern thing, you talked about this one. See, in terms of, you're also referring to what you talk about, the language. So how do these words, see, we talk so different words now in one sense. We talk of the same Christ, but the word seems to be sometimes very different. And therefore, how do we negotiate that kind of a diversity in this ecumenical language?
Yes, that's a very practical and very important one. So if we look back at the history of the institutionalized ecumenical movement, that was working based on representations of the great confessions. So there were the representatives of the Roman Catholic Church, 5 pieces, for if we improve diversity from 5 continents or 6 continents. So that was already casted in the logic or through the logic of the grand narratives. But now I meet a colleague from, let me say, from the, let me just think a little bit. I meet a colleague from a most conservative Roman Catholic university. And we start relating, again, the givenness of the situation, and then you discover, like, wow, this person does not represent that great narrative. So I think the way forward in the Roman Catholic Church, of course, the question of synodality is very much there, and I resonate a lot with that. But going into human activities and encounters, this is so getting down from these absolute principles to the way where we meet each other as created like humans, so very similar. You are like me, and you are not at all like me in those tensions. So in terms of ecumenical movements, I think that the whole institutionalized ecumenical movement will need transformation, at least getting out of this logic of modernity in which we think in boxes. And that's also in the Protestant, it's valid for the Protestant churches. For example, the Protestant church in the Netherlands. Who can represent that entity? There is, from the most conservative to the most liberal, and you see I am still working with modernist categories there. How do we invent language to describe who the other is? Only through experiences. But experiences are not only like personal experiences. They should always go further. A group experience, a community experience.
So much. Now, if anybody has, you can clarify your doubts with her during the break. Okay, we thank you, Doctor, for your presentation. Yeah. We have a break for 20 minutes, then we come back.